Okay, good afternoon, folks. Welcome to session 4. Today we're gonna start with unit 2 that is related to research on the teaching of conversation. Okay, so for this session, we're gonna start with a class discussion. I've got a question here for you, and we have, when do you know that you have fluent English? When do you notice that you have fluent English?
I know that I have a fluid English when I am able to follow up on a conversation that I am not prepared for. So it comes casual and I am able to elaborate and talk about it.
Okay, very good. Do you think that we need something to take into account to have a fluent English? For example, vocabulary, fluency, interlanguage. What do you think about those?
Yeah, definitely, because all those are the parts of speech. And they have to do with the structure of our sentences, and we need to use them properly in order to have a conversation.
Okay, very good. Okay, here we have the 6 key terms of teaching conversation. Among them, sorry, we have the fluency. What is fluency for you? What is the difference between fluency and accuracy?
Well, being fluent is being able to, for example, pronounce accurately, having the right pace, the right tone, and because of that, being able to have, I'd say, yeah, a fluent conversation. Like if you have the right pace, the right tone of voice, if you have the right pronunciation, then your conversation becomes fluent.
And what about accuracy?
Accuracy. Mm,
Yes.
well, I'm not sure, but maybe accuracy has to do with the fact that our sentences have semantics and syntax,
That's right.
like, okay, that they are coherent and we make sense.
Yeah, that's right. Another terms, some important when we talk about conversation at the moment when you're gonna teach it is the interlanguage. Have you got some idea about it?
Uh, Sorry, could you repeat the question again?
What is interlanguage or international communication?
Then I guess it's been able to communicate in another language other than our, I'd say, uh, mother tongue.
Yeah, good. And comprehensible input, that is another factors, another terms of teaching conversation. Here we have it. It says that interlanguage theory. Let me see. Let me see. Okay, what is a comprehensible input? It says that it is a critical concept for second language development for a student with and without learning difficulties. Comprehensible input means that the student should be able to understand the essence of what is being said or presented to them. Do you think that here it is when you're talking, when you're making a speech, it is a must to use grammar correctly, or no matter how you speak, but the most important is to be understood. What do you think?
Well, definitely it is important, but it's not a must because, for example, if we are talking to a sympathetic listener, and by sympathetic listener, I mean that this person speaks your language. If you speak to them on a second language, they will be able to understand because they would notice that probably you are translating something directly from your mother tongue, even though the grammar is not accurate. But probably if you speak to someone who belongs to the country from which well, in this case, from the country from where you're using the language, then they will probably have struggles understanding you.
Okay, that's right. Another terms that we use in the teaching conversation is negotiation means. Do you think that it's related to the meaning by context? Here says that a negotiation is a strategic discussion that resolves an issue in a way that both parties find acceptable. In a negotiation, each party tries to persuade the other to agree with his or her point of view. By negotiating, all involved parties try to avoid arguing but agree to reach some form of compromise. And the last one, the last part that we need to take into account is the pushed output. This is a technique that requires regular speaking tasks that can be carried out formally or informally. Nonetheless, formal speaking tasks are important because they push learners to communicate effectively during transactional conversations. For example, when we talk about negotiation meaning, you know that when you are, for example, working with some speaking activity and you don't, a student don't understand some words, the first thing that they do is to go to Google to look up the word. Do you think that's the best way to understand the meaning of a missing word, a noun word?
Well, I don't know if the best, but I think that of course, if you don't know the meaning to something, the the I think it should be something that everyone should do, like look for the meaning of that so that we are able to understand whatever, we are speaking or writing, or depending on what kind of activity are we putting into practice. Because if we don't do that, then we will not be able to fully understand what is being said.
Okay. If you get a chance to be an English teacher and you are struggling with negotiation of meaning, which technique would you use? This question is for everybody. You can answer. Oreste, what do you think? Nayelis, if you get a chance to be an English teacher and you are negotiating of meaning of words, which technique would you use? Okay, we're gonna leave that question at the end. Now let's talk about how to improve spoken English. Which element do you think that we need to take into account to improve our English?
What elements and in what skills maybe?
Yes.
To improve, you said, our language.
Yeah, to improve spoken English.
Well, I think that speaking is number one because you can know all the grammar, you you know, but if you don't really speak, you will never make it. Like even though you know rules to constructing sentences, if you don't practice pronunciation, then you'll not be able to communicate. So I think that's one of the most important things. Also, if you have the opportunity, it would be good to exchange, conversations with native speakers because that way you can try to imitate their pronunciation as much as you can and use it in your own favor.
That's right. Another important things that I always use with my students is that I tell them that they think in English because you know that most of the students that are learning English, they think in Spanish first and then translate the ideas that they have in mind into English. At the beginning, it can be hard to think in English because you know that they are starting, but is the most suitable way that we can do it because at a certain point when we are accustomed in thinking just in Spanish and after translating in English, there is sometimes that the student can be blocked. Another thing that, as you said, Azucena, is to pay attention to stressed sounds, especially for the final sounds that you know that are some sounds that most of the student miss. And the past tenses of the verbs, most of the times we don't pronounce in the correct way, which are other things that we need to take into account here. We have here a Francis Esther, Nayelis, Oreste. What about master English registers? Do you think that it's so important to take into account this to improve our English, spoken English? The burning question would be, what are registers? Do you remember in the previous midterm that you were taking professional interpretation techniques that we were talking about registers? Maciel, do you remember that?
Um, what I need, can you repeat that again?
What about master English registers? Do you think it's so important to take into account that to improve our spoken English?
Mm, I honestly don't remember what is that. Master English register?
Who remembers? I'm gonna give you a cue. Do you remember that when we were talking about some emails that one of this one was directed to a friend that the writing was so informal and the other one was lead to the president that was in a very written formal way?
Okay, so I guess that depending on the context, of course, that is important because there are places and moments to use those uh, two types of I'd say speaking. Like you know, depending on the context and who you are talking to, then we should address them differently. Like I cannot, just like you said, I cannot speak the same way to my boss and I would speak to my friend.
Right.
It has to do with the etiquette and I think that we have to be, of course, professional to address, for example, someone who's superior, who's in a superior role at work, or for to your students. Like you should be respectful and polite with them.
Right. What about using a mirror? Do you think that that can be a useful technique?
I not used it, but I recommended it because I think
Have you ever done it when you
I
started
haven't.
learning English?
I haven't. But I think that for someone a newbie, a beginner, it could be helpful because they would see what is that they're failing at, and they would probably feel motivated to open their mouth um, and conduct the proper movements that are necessary in order to pronounce correctly. Oreste wants to participate.
Just you have participated. And we have, let me see, we have 5 participants. Four participants, and only you have said some opinion. So some people says that a student must be focused on English fluency, not in grammar. What do you think?
I'd say that that's like a controversial topic because both things matter, but of course that when it comes to
Right.
speaking, you need to focus you know, in fluency rather than in grammar because like I said before, you can know all the grammar in the world, but if you don't put that into practice and you don't speak, then it's worthless.
Yeah, that's right. And when we try English tongue twisters, do you think that tongue twisters can improve the spoken English?
Absolutely, because they challenge you and sometimes well, the purpose of tongue twister is to combine the different sounds with vowels and consonants. So it can be challenging, but at the same time, it's a very good practice so that people masters the sounds.
Yeah, that's right. There are many things that we need to take into account if we want to improve our spoken English. Some of them were the first one that we were mentioning. For example, I have here singing in English, learn word, focus with new words, learn phrases, not words. Do you agree with the last one? To learn phrases, not words.
I mean, you need to do both, but the phrases are like something that sometimes people fail at because when we talk about phrases, I think that we're referring to idiomatic expressions or phrasal verbs that are very, I'd say that are used very often on a native speaker with a native speaker. And so if you don't know those phrases, like if you don't know the specific meaning that they have, you could get confused and you'll not be able to follow up on the conversation.
Right. In this session, when you got time, you can see, you can watch 2 videos, how you have fluent English when you're speaking. And the other video is related to how to understand native speakers more easily. And there are 25 very common reductions in English when we talk about sayings or idiomatic expressions, you know? And for ending these sessions, you know that this session is just for discussions because it's a speaking. how we can teach speaking. And for ending this, I would like to listen to all of you telling me an activity and an input activities, and how would you develop these activity?
About speaking?
Yeah, about speaking, right?
Well, for example,
Remember that we have input and output. Just tell me one of the input activities, and how would you develop, how would you carry out that activity with your students if you were an English teacher? I'm gonna let me see here. There are some examples. Okay, we have tell stories, visualize, sing songs, play games. But which techniques would you use? Which strategies would you use to carry out these activities? This is gonna be the last question, okay? So with this question, we end the session.
well, there is one here that talks about tell stories. Um, well, related to telling stories, the whole purpose is that either you read it to the students or you ask them to read it. And once they have read, you should instruct them to give you their interpretation, basically what they understood, or to summarize, which is the context of the story, so that you actually know if they actually understood the information, like they were able to interpret it, but also, for example, that they are good at active listening, because if you read it to them, then you're not only going to test them on speaking, but also listening.
Okay.
And well, if you read it themselves, then you're practicing reading and also speaking.
What about you, Cindy? Okay, we have a
Oh,
Francis, a Cindy, and Ayelis.
yeah. Yeah, if I were a teacher, I think that I will go with the input activity, watch news or movies. So I guess that it's a great chance for students to watch a kind of movies that they really like, right? That can call their attention immediately. And then we can dispute, or we can talk about what happened in the movies. I, I will ask, like questions. And students, as Marcel was saying, they, I mean, it's not only that they will speak, but they would listen, they would read, and then they will discuss. So I think that watch news or movies is a really good one for um, speaking activity.
Cindy, in your case, would you combine the four skills in this activity?
Um, Absolutely. Yeah, because the student, maybe they will read the subtitles, they would listen to the news or to the movie, and then you will make them to speak up at the end. So at least three of them will be combined.
Okay, very good. Okay, if there's not more opinion, I really appreciate your participation, girls. Remember that when you participate, your attendance is here. I'm taking attendance now. And thanks for participating, and be ready for the next session that you know is next Sunday. And I hope you're working on the tasks that you have on the platform. And good luck. Okay.
you.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Bye.